In the early hours of 17 February 1942, in the Barents approaches north of Murmansk, a British submarine advanced beneath a ceiling of compact ice that stretched unbroken across the frozen sea. The ocean above them was solid, and the enemy waited below. The vessel moved at slow speed as the crew monitored depth, temperature, and the faint echoes that pulsed back from the ice pack. The boat's commander stood behind the helmsman and weighed each decision with the practiced stillness of an officer who understood the limits of both machinery and men. The patrol had begun as a technical trial, yet the submarine now pressed deeper into waters that no Royal Navy vessel had ever attempted to navigate in wartime. A petty officer recorded in his log that the hull creaked like timber under pressure, though the steel plates held firm. He noted the bitter cold within the forward compartment and wrote that the Arctic seemed to compress every sound until only the thrum of the motors remained. His entry, measured and formal, described the moment the crew realized that the ice above them had sealed entirely, removing any chance of surfacing until they cleared the zone. The Admiralty had authorized the mission to test under-ice navigation after reports of German surface raiders using the Arctic ice belt for concealment. The Soviet Navy, fighting to protect convoys along the northern route, had shared intelligence indicating increased U-boat movements in the same waters. British planners sought to determine whether a submarine could operate in an environment where compasses faltered, periscopes froze, and air temperatures threatened to immobilize even the most robust equipment. This patrol vessel, selected for its sturdy pressure hull and reliable battery output, had undergone modifications at Rosyth to strengthen bulkheads, insulate key cables, and adapt air systems for sustained cold exposure. Engineers predicted that the Arctic temperature gradients would distort sonar returns, yet they believed that the crew's experience would compensate. Senior officers framed the mission as hazardous but feasible, though the men aboard understood that an emergency ascent could prove impossible beneath ice of unknown thickness. Radio intercepts had identified the presence of a German picket line south of the pack, supported by shore stations along the Norwegian front. The patrol's objective was to verify these reports while attempting to locate Soviet naval units conducting their own frigid operations. Coordination between British and Soviet forces remained cautious, yet Admiralty records show that both sides agreed to exchange navigational observations essential for Arctic survival. The submarine moved into an area where the barometer readings dropped sharply, signaling a rising pressure front that threatened to shift the ice mass. The officer of the watch directed minor adjustments in depth to avoid submerged ridges that dipped unpredictably. At one point, the sounding gear registered a shallow ceiling that forced the boat down to a depth that brought them within dangerous range of German hydrophone detection. A leading seaman later wrote in a personal memorandum that he heard the sharp metallic resonance of distant propellers through the hull. He identified the beat pattern as consistent with a patrol craft used by the Kriegsmarine in northern operations. The crew reduced speed to a crawl as the commander considered whether to hold position or attempt a silent retreat into deeper water. Archival entries show that Soviet naval intelligence had reported similar encounters in nearby sectors during the same week. Their coastal flotillas noted an increase in German listening activity as the ice thickened and forced shipping into narrow channels. These observations supported the belief that the Germans expected Allied submarines to probe the region in search of convoy threats. Inside the British submarine, engineers maintained a strict schedule to monitor battery depletion. The cold drained power at a faster rate than standard calculations predicted. Each decision to adjust depth consumed energy that could not be easily replenished without surfacing. The commander instructed the engine room to maintain quiet running despite the strain on the motors. The submarine pressed onward until sound operators detected harmonics that indicated the presence of drifting flows grinding against one another. This acoustic signature told them that the ice field might be thinning in patches. The possibility of a breakable surface offered a measure of reassurance, though no sailor dared express it aloud. Their training emphasized that only precise observation, not speculation, would preserve the boat. During a midday watch, the submarine encountered turbulent water beneath the ice shelf. This mixture of brine and melt produced erratic buoyancy that forced constant corrections. The navigator examined temperature gradients and identified a boundary layer that revealed the subtle movement of the pack above them. To stay within a stable band, the vessel adjusted heading by several degrees to avoid a drifting ridge that could scrape the periscope housing. Shortly after, the hydrophone operator captured the low rumble of engines far to the south. The pattern aligned with reports of a German escort group stationed near the convoy routes. The British submarine descended slightly and shut down non-essential systems to reduce noise. The decision increased condensation inside the compartments, and droplets formed along instrument housings. The crew wiped them clean with steady hands, fully aware that any malfunction could compromise the entire patrol. An entry in the engineering log noted that the forward ballast tank vents stiffened due to frost accumulation. The crew applied gentle heat to restore movement, careful not to raise their acoustic signature. The engineers worked through the challenge with deliberate precision, adhering to procedures refined through years of training rather than any improvisation. By early evening, the submarine reached its northernmost point, where the ice shifted from solid white to a corrugated mix of pressure ridges. The boat moved beneath this canopy as if threading a labyrinth. Each ridge cast a distinct sonar shadow, and the operators interpreted these shapes with increasing confidence. Their success in reading such subtle cues demonstrated a developing understanding of under-ice navigation that would later influence Allied Arctic doctrine. Late in the patrol, the submarine detected rhythmic pulses that matched a known Soviet signaling pattern. The crew waited for a confirming return. When it arrived, faint but unmistakable, the commander ordered a low-level ascent until the vessel operated just beneath the thinnest ice. There they released a coded lamp signal through a small upward-facing aperture used specifically for Arctic communication tests. A Soviet coastal submarine responded with a reciprocal blink from beneath a nearby floe. The two vessels maintained a respectful distance as wartime protocol required. Yet the brief exchange confirmed that joint under-ice operations were technically achievable. This moment, recorded without flourish in official reports, marked one of the earliest instances of British and Soviet submarines cooperating in Arctic waters during active operations. As the British vessel began its return track, they encountered an unexpected pressure ridge that had shifted since their northbound transit. The hull passed beneath it with only a narrow margin. The sound officer reported a scraping resonance near the aft section, though examination revealed no structural compromise. The event reinforced the constant danger of ice movement, independent of enemy presence. Radio operators attempted a scheduled transmission, but found that atmospheric conditions distorted long-wave signals. The commander chose to delay all communication until the vessel reached clearer water. This decision reduced the risk of interception, while ensuring that no partial report might be misread by Allied stations, especially during ongoing German activity along the coast. Throughout the night, the crew maintained a disciplined routine. Men worked in short rotations to minimize fatigue in the cold, and ration heating was reduced to conserve energy. Condensation froze along the watertight doors, forming a thin crystalline layer that the sailors brushed away with gloved hands. Their actions reflected a calm acceptance of the environment, rather than any notion of endurance for its own sake. By dawn, the submarine advanced into a zone where the ice thinned enough to allow potential surfacing. The commander ordered the boat to periscope depth. The instrument rose through a narrow opening and confirmed that patches of open water lay ahead. The sight offered a measured relief, though the patrol remained incomplete until they cleared German listening posts. As they approached the southern limit of the ice field, the sound operator detected once again the signature of a German patrol craft. The commander adjusted course to exploit a natural trough in the ice that masked their acoustic output. The vessel moved deliberately, using the slow oscillation of the floe edges to conceal its wake. These maneuvers demonstrated a tactical awareness that would later be studied in training manuals. When open sea finally emerged, the submarine surfaced cautiously. The crew cleared frost from the bridge and restored normal ventilation. A coded message was transmitted to confirm mission progress. The Admiralty later noted that the report contained concise observations on ice density, acoustic behavior, and enemy activity, all documented with the restraint expected of a naval officer. The vessel continued southward until it reached an agreed waypoint for rendezvous with an escort. Logs from the accompanying destroyer recorded that the submarine's exterior bore signs of ice abrasion, yet displayed no structural damage. The crew disembarked with the same quiet professionalism that had guided them throughout the patrol. In subsequent months, the Admiralty analyzed the submarine's findings and concluded that under-ice operations, once considered impractical, could be developed into a strategic capability. They found that the Arctic environment, though hostile, offered concealment that no surface vessel could match. Soviet counterparts reached similar conclusions based on their own experience, and both navies refined tactics that would shape later Cold War doctrine. The patrol demonstrated that careful navigation, disciplined teamwork, and a clear respect for environmental limits could overcome the challenges of icebound seas. Its lessons influenced training for reconnaissance, convoy protection, and silent approach tactics in regions where ice cover complicated conventional methods. Years later, a former crew member wrote in a private account that the memory of the under-ice sealing remained more vivid than any enemy encounter. He described the stillness of the Arctic and the knowledge that only the boat's steel skin separated them from the crushing weight above. His words, formal and steady, captured the restrained ethos of the men who served in such conditions. The patrol returned to its base with no ceremony. Reports were filed, equipment inspected, and temporary modifications removed. Yet in the quiet routines of post-mission assessment, senior officers recognized that the crew had achieved a milestone that others had judged beyond reach at the time. In retrospect, the under-ice patrol marked a turning point in submarine warfare. It proved that the Arctic, once considered a natural barrier, could become an operational corridor. It also demonstrated that cooperation between Allied navies in extreme environments offered practical benefits that extended beyond wartime necessity. The image of a lone submarine moving beneath a continuous sheet of ice remained a defining symbol of the mission. The boat had traveled through a world where the surface was inaccessible, the depths uncertain, and the margin for error narrow. Yet through methodical practice and unbroken focus, the crew traced a path that expanded the limits of naval strategy. As the war advanced and front lines shifted across continents, the lessons drawn from that voyage continued to influence planning at a time when precision and silence often outweighed firepower. The patrol's achievements were not defined by confrontation, but by endurance, coordination, and a steady commitment to operational clarity. In the end, the crew's accomplishment lay in their ability to move through an environment that challenged every assumption of submarine warfare. Their patrol below the Arctic ice demonstrated that knowledge, discipline, and resolve could open new routes in a world shaped by conflict. And as the submarine slipped southward on its homeward journey, the ceiling of ice above them receded, leaving behind a memory that echoed the opening image. The ocean above them had been solid, and the enemy had waited below. If you value these quiet moments of history, your support allows us to share more of them. Until the next report.